Hello, everyone. Good evening, or whenever good is to you, whenever the good time is. Good now, I should say. Good now. Okay, we'll start with the praise to Manjushri, Refuge, and the Heart Sutra as usual. I pay homage to Guru and Lord Arya Manjushri. Your intelligence shines forth like a sun, unclouded by the two obscurations. You hold the scripture text in your heart, symbolic of the seeing of all things as they are. Those who are caught in the prison of samsara are confused in the darkness of ignorance and overwhelmed by their suffering. In 60 ways with your speech, you teach migratory beings to whom you are compassionate as the only child. Your proclamation of Dharma is like a roaring thunder, which awakens beings from the stupor of delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma. Your word is sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. Primordially pure, your princely body is the embodiment of perfection of a bodhisattva dwelling on 10th bhumi. I pay homage to Manjushri, who dispels my ignorance, whose body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha. With the billions of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate darkness, enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's word to explain them. Omara Bhajana In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment reach. By the merit of listening to these teachings, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all living beings. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment reach. By the merit of listening to this teaching, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all living beings. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment reach. By the merit of listening to the teaching, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all living beings. May all living beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all living beings be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow. May all living beings not be separated from the bliss that is sorrowless. May all living beings live attachment and hatred towards near ones afar by living with equanimity. May all living beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May all living beings be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow. May all living beings not be separated from the bliss that is sorrowless. May all living beings live attachment and hatred towards near ones afar by living with equanimity. May all living beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May all living beings be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow. May all living beings be not separated from the bliss that is sorrowless. May all living beings live attachment and hatred towards near ones afar by living with equanimity. To the perfection of wisdom, the Blessed Mother, I pay homage. Thus I have heard at one time. Blessed One, Bhagavan, was dwelling in Rajgriha on Vulture's Peak, together with a great assembly of Sangha and a great assembly of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in a Mahasamadhi on the enumeration of phenomena called the profound illumination. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, Superior Avalokiteshvara, was contemplating the meaning of the profound perfection of wisdom, and saw that the five aggregates also are empty of inherent existence. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said these to the Bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, Superior Avalokiteshvara. How should a son or daughter of good lineage train who wishes to practice profound perfection wisdom? Thus he spoke, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, superior Avalokitesha, said this to Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of good lineage who wishes to practice profound perfection of wisdom should view in this way. That should correctly view those five aggregates also as empty of inherent existence. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, in the same way, all phenomena are merely empty. That is without characteristic. They are not created, they do not cease, they have no impurity, they are not devoid of impurity, they do not decrease and increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no phenomena. There is no eye element, so forth, up to the no mind element, also up to no element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, no exhaustion of ignorance, and so forth, up to no aging and death, and no exhaustion of aging and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no cessation, no power, no exalted wisdom, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because Bodhisattva have no attainment, they depend on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Because their minds are without obstructions, they are without fear. Having completely passed beyond all error, they go to the completion of nirvana. All the Buddhas abide in the three times, having relied on the perfection of wisdom, become manifestly perfect Buddhas in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, mantra of perfection of wisdom is the mantra of great knowledge. Unsurpassed mantra, the mantra that equals the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all sufferings. Because it is not false, it should be known as the truth. Mantra of perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Dadya Om Gade Gade Bara Gade Bara Zangade Bodhisattva. Dadya Om Gade Gade Bara Gade Bara Zangade Bodhisattva. Dadya Om Gade Gade Bara Gade Bara Zangade Bodhisattva. Dadya Om Gade Gade Bara Gade Bara Zangade Bodhisattva. Dadya Om Gade Gade Bara Gade Bara Zangade Bodhisattva. Tadya dong gade gade bara zangade bodhisattva. Tadya dong 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 gade bara zangade bodhisattva. Tadya tha om gade bara zangade bodhisattva. Shariputra, Bodhisattva, Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom in that way. Then the Blessed One, the sort of samadhi of the sages, Bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, superior Avalokitesha, well done, well done, well. One of good lineage, it is just so. One of good lineage is like that. The profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught it. Even the Tathagata Tathagatas will rejoice in this. The Blessed One having so spoken, Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, the Mahasat, Spirit of Avalokitesha, and all those gathered there, and those of the world, gods, the humans, the demigods, Gandharvas were filled with admiration, praised the words of the Blessed One. Every time we cherish something, it's usually for ourselves, something from matter, between matter to consciousness. We try to acquire something that we lack. As there's no question about our own, the very pursuers, and therefore try to find things from outside that is good to us. As the ourself is unquestionably a deserver of everything that we seek to gain, either knowledge or power or possessions or friendship or relationships or recognition or even enlightenment or even a certain kind of higher status, worldly or supramundane, that we seek. They're all highly cherished by most people. But in the Mahayana Buddhism, it completely changes. The very pursuit for all things for oneself at the expense of others is the very cause of the very vicious cycle of samsara. So therefore, self-centeredness, wanting things and objects, places, recognitions for oneself, is the very root cause of selfishness, so root cause of suffering. Hence, Dharmarakshita, as a very celebrated meditator who pay heed to the Mahayana doctrine, in which it says all the suffering stems from the very self-centeredness, and all the happiness come from the selflessness. So this writing by Dharmarakshita addresses this in a very kind of confronting way. The author himself is making all adversarial things that life actually brings, rather than pleasant things. All the adversity that we find, even though we seek none of these. we only meet the adversities, which majority of people will reject and see them as hindrances. But Dharmarakshita uses his writing not just as a poem, but as a very revelatory practice to reveal or show oneself the often difficult to apprehend as the root cause of the problem. So here he continued to address these with ego, the very the idea of Atma. The Atma, the self, is the enemy that is unapprehended, a non-apprehended enemy. One who can apprehend the enemy, that is the ego, and grasping to it. Of course, one who does not know the true cause, most of the damage and suffering to others and to one's own temporal self is caused by the selfishness. Most people don't even know that. But as a bodhisattva who conceives these, therefore uses the very adversities and contradiction in our mind or thoughts or behaviors or attitudes or perceptions and intention, whatever he uses, he recognizes them as the sign of the proliferation of this ego grasping. as we read in his writing, starting on third paragraph on page 6, the verse number 867 and 68. Though clad in saffron robes, I take refuge in the ghosts. So here he says, even though one who's wearing, he refers to saffron robes is synonymous for an ordained person, ordained person. Ordained person is sometimes called, we can call them ecclesiastes in a Judeo-Christian language. In Buddhism, they call a robed person, and lay persons are laity and the robed. So here talking about saffron robes or crimson robed or whatever color, not only saffron, but anyone who has received an ordination in the pratimoksha will be counted as a saffron robed person. Even those person who's not a monastic still has something, not by dress what they wear or clothing they wear, but that one who has sought refuge in the triple gem and then supposedly follow the footsteps of the Buddha. So that's what he's addressing to. I take refuge in the ghosts. So this is talking about selfishness. Even one is taking refuge in the triple gem, one try to take refuge in the triple gem to better the self. To better the self. So which is totally defeats the very purpose. It should actually make oneself simple, a renunciate, a selfless, a homeless person. But if the one is practicing as a robed or unrobed person, having sought refuge, but if one is using the practicing Dharma to better the ego, to boost the pride and self-importance, then that's exactly, he says, I'm taking refuge in the ghosts. So ghost here refers to not the Holy Ghost, is the evil ghost of the self-centeredness. Though I have promised to keep solemn vows of strict morals, so this is talking about one who has sought any of the pratimoksha vows and have refuge in the triple gem. But even if one do keep some of the sort of physical vows, but one try to gain names, recognitions, respect, and honor, and some privileges. If one is doing that, then he says, yet conduct is that of a demon, So wanting recognition, wanting status, wanting some kind of special privileges, even if one is actually observing those vows, But if the observing the vows and taking refuge is to better the ego and try to emulate a conduct that actually is try to better one's own standing, one's own place, one's own status, one's own, I would say, rights or benefits. If one is seeking that, then of course I have gone completely against the very pratimoksha. He's not explicit pratimoksha, but he's actually implying pratimoksha, because the pratimoksha means individual liberation. In Mahayana, that pratimoksha itself is designed to gain liberation from the ego, really. It's not really to gain liberation from samsara only, for nirvana for oneself. Because in the context of the Mahayana pratimoksha, one who's seeking to gain higher rebirth is really taking refuge in the ghost. Or taking even, so that if one is behaving to better ego and self, and one's conventional social privileges a benefit, if one's mainly really, that's the hidden agenda, then whatever outer behaviors or vows, one may even observe them. The very intent of observing these precepts undermines the very practices that one does. So he says, he calls upon Yamantaka, dance and trample on the head of this betrayer. Often people think the betrayer is someone out there. You betrayed me. He betrayed me. People always pointing finger at betraying me. But real betrayer is this ego. This ego. Even when we think we are betrayed by somebody, it's because we are ego grasping. Therefore, we feel betrayed. But one who really are paying heed to the Mahayana teaching is that we are more conspicuously betrayed by ego, more frequently and consistently than others. Others may betray once or twice, and then once we spot them, once we denounce them, that they are nowhere to be seen. They'll disappear. You will, of course, will not let them do anything anyway because you think they betrayed you. But this ego is constantly in there, constantly hiding behind the skin, behind the whatever. So therefore, one is actually more betrayed by one's own selfishness. So therefore, Yamantaka is the slayer of the ego. You know, Yama. He's the Yama. Yama is the slayer. He's the henchman. And he has to be the king. King who slays. Ego is a king, is a real slayer. The person who slays others doesn't slay anybody else. And so therefore he says, dance and trample. Because why should you ask Yamantaka to dance? So there's a little bit of a joy in apprehending this true betrayer. You know, you say, oh, I got you. This time I got the real one. So one is dancing. Whereas other times we might think it's outside of a person, someone who betrayed us. And then we try to highlight them. Then we try to denounce him or her so that everybody knows there's only one or two betrayers like this in the world. And so we can clean the world from such betrayers, and then we could really rest in peace, Tapa Atisha. The true betrayer is this false conception, this wrong conception, thinking the others are the betrayer, that I'm the betrayed. This is the wrong of all conceptions. This is the sankalpa. This is the conception that mistakenly confuse ourselves. Our own misconception confuse us more than this alleged object that betrays us. Of course, in this dualistic world, they will always look on out there. Who is the betrayer? Who is the one who's taking advantage of us and others and so on, as we can just pick them one by one, and so the world is the world is lesser and lesser of those betrayers. From the Mahayana's point of view, is this very ego that itself is so mistakenly confused as the victim, not as a perpetrator. So here, therefore, say, apprehend these, and this is mortally strike at the heart of this butcher, the enemy, the ego. So this is calling him Yamantaka. This is now the metacognitive awareness, because if we sometimes can see that, oh, it's really my own ego, that's really a problem. As soon as we see that, we tend to tame our mind or thoughts or words. We are somewhat sort of like a horse rider holds the bridle. You're actually able to guide your mind from doing or saying or thinking a particular way. Why? Because we have now completely arrested, we have completely recognized the unrecognizable, often mistaken one. This time we have really apprehended the inner enemy who is lurking all the time. We never thought there it was. We thought it was all out there. So therefore, strike at the very heart of this butcher. This butcher is not just, this butcher is referring to previously we screamed at other people. We screamed at our mother or loved ones or friends, saying it's their problem. We have hurt their feelings, and our friendship was destroyed as a result of that. This ego is so therefore this is the one that has caused me despair and hurt and pain and anguish and all these things, but I've never recognized that he was the one who's doing. So therefore, please strike at this very enemy. So it's more like a self-injunction.
though my happiness are bestowed by gods, I propitiate malevolent spirits. So this is referring to, of course, Dharmarakshita honors certain gods, worldly or supermundane gods, deities maybe, like Yamantaka. He obviously is propitiating Yamantaka. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think he sees the Yamantaka as someone out there who's going to come in aid of helping to butcher your ego. Yamantaka has been hanging on the wall so 20 years, but he still hasn't moved an inch. So he's obviously talking to he's talking as a devotee, that even though all the good things I have are blessings of the deities, and yet I propitiate evil spirits, malevolent spirits. So he's propitiating, said I propitiate the ego and maybe some family gods or worldly gods or whatnot. People are propitiating this kind of spirits. What we want, we are propitiating. We are trying to please these things, even though our happiness have come from the divine blessings. But yet I'm propitiating the other. Though Dharma acts as a savior, I deceive the three jewels. Actually, the Dharma is the real savior. Yet I try to do a lip service to the three jewels. So I deceive the three jewels. Meaning I do not see the omniscience of the Buddha. I don't see the incontrovertibility of the Dharma. I doubt in them. I sometimes may even disassociate and turn my back to this holy Sangha. So I'm actually thinking that I'm deceived or not harmed, not helped by them, and then I turn my back and doubt the efficacy of the practicing the refuge. So actually, the very things that I'm a little bit safer now are the Dharma itself is saving me from reacting, from overreacting, from blaming. Even not blaming somebody is saving us from blaming and harming them. But if we are not blaming them so that we look good on them, good on others, and they look bad because they did the real harmful thing, and we just kept quiet as we were good, it's actually deceiving the Triple Gem, really. Deep down, Triple Gem knows everything is a bit more interdependent than one being white and one is black from, ultimately like that, So we too have to, even though we didn't react, maybe someone's provocation, and maybe it's Dharma that is helping us to stop us from reacting, isn't it? Without Dharma, we would have habitually reacted. We would have stood up, and how dare, some type of thing, Then now there's a little bit of a sort of tameness in us, considerateness in us, that is actually Dharma in action. That is the refuge in action, happening. Yet we think that we question the veracity of the Dharma. So I deceive the three jewels. So this is talking about doubt, really. Sometimes we doubt Dharma or practice or certain techniques or even the teachings or lineage and so on. We doubt as a people, can I really work with these people? Do I really benefit from this? So the time when we doubt others is the demon of selfishness is actually rising up again and try to betray the very saving that Dharma has done so long, or your friends of the Sangha has helped us so much, and all of a sudden we think we discover some reason to doubt. So it's actually, that's more of an indicator that we are about to be betrayed by our own ego grasping than the thing outside. Hence, he calls upon Yamantaka to dance in apprehending this betrayer within oneself, trample on the head so that his head or ego The identity of the ego is not left any trace of it, because this is the misconception that we thought it was external once, but and then we doubt the triple gem. It's actually our own lack of confidence in the triple gem makes us to think that we can infinitely doubt, even though doubt is healthy for some reason. But even doubt has its own limit. So therefore, it's false conception to see the infinitely beneficial merit of doubt, because there has to be some room for faith. Mortally strike at the heart of this butcher, the enemy, the ego. So these two verses mainly looking at the outer behavior and then the way we relate to our vows, even though we might be observing the vows by the books, by the way, So by pratimoksha, they look good. They might even look good on others, and you may even earn more respect than you want. But and if you feel, oh, that's good, I'm really living by the books, I haven't made a wrong move ever since, and everybody's pleased with me. You start to think like that, then actually this is the misconception. This is the demon that we are actually now starting to cherish and honor. The one should still say, oh, this is just only my recent greatest sort of attempt to display my best effort, but I'm far more than far more inadequate than however adequate I may look impressive to other people. So if one is able to do that, so as soon as the pride and confidence and I suppose self-importance manifests, then one has to recognize that. That's what it means. It doesn't really mean to destroy the ego as such. You have to have something left to work with. I don't think there's a lot of danger in any one of us who destroy ego too quickly. But we have to be careful that this kind of teachings aren't interpreted extreme manner, so that that people feel it's all my fault. That's of course not healthy. It's definitely not. It's not saying it's not all my fault. Everything is interdependent, but ego has to own its own share of mistakes, share of hypocrisy, share of self-centeredness, and share of the responsibility of doubts and so on. So one has to really outer behavior might be very impressive, very immaculate, even in the eyes or perception of others, but that is probably more of a danger, because at least then one has a false pretense, thinking I'm perfect, I'm pure. When one is now seeking recognition and respect from others, thinking one's behavior warrants them, that is probably the ego grasping of a subtle kind that the society can't read. For a Lojong practitioner whose main task is to tame his selfishness, he probably needs more criticism, more sort of the opposite, because then at least he will appreciate and then see where his patience is. Who doesn't like respect? Who doesn't like social respect or honor? From the worldliest, from even a non-spiritual, want that doesn't need. So therefore, to be inflated with ego, saying I'm pure, I have this respect, or I have lived everything by the book, and then thinking that is the biggest betrayer. This is the biggest betrayer. So here one needs to sort of see the multi-layered meaning of what it means by apprehending the ego, and then because if one feels I'm pure, I'm better than others, as people respect me, then actually that is butchering the ego more hard, so therefore this has been the butcher that is who's trying to boost the ego and it's his or her importance. But even if one try to live by some of the conventional precepts and vows, refuge and so on, but still one is actually using them to better one's worldly standing, mundane worldly dharma. If one is doing that, then we need someone like the Manjushri in wrathful form, that is Yamantaka, to alert ourselves and to not to be deceived yet again, and go to refuge in a kind of realizational level, then on the mainly just then on the by the letters, by the text. Though always living in attitude or solitude, this is talking about meditators, this is people who are talking about people wearing robes, and now talking about not only wearing robes, they're now committing themselves to solitude. He says, though always living in solitude, I'm carried away by distractions. Though receiving sacred teachings, I cherish divination and shamanism. Dance and trample on the head of the betrayer, false conception, mortal strike at the heart of the butcher, the enemy, the ego. So this verse referring to those who take some time off with some kind of renunciation to be genuinely, and try to practice meditation or do the preliminary prayers or whatever practice one do. But even though one is physically in a solitude, but one is even more busy with distractions. So hampering one's qualitative concentration. So merely being in solitude is actually no sign that my meditation is necessarily flourishing. If I'm carried away by the distraction saying, if I did this, I will be seen to be good, I will be respected, I can tell I did this, or then I'm much senior than others, unlike others who haven't done any meditation. If one is starting to have these kind of sort of wishes, then one is truly distracted. Even though one is doing all the meditation formally by the books, numbers, the sessions and everything by the according to the instruction manual, but if one has this kind of worldly attitudes of the sort of worldly gains, respect and self-importance, all these things, then one is definitely distracted. So he says, so even though I have received the teachings showing us what to do, what to not do, yet people are still consulting astrologers and tarot reading and Mo, in Tibetan we call Mo, this divination is a Mo, always consulting, not just lay people consulting, but even the monks consulting other monks. Whether I should take traditional medicine or Western medicine, this kind of thing. Unfortunately, many do, because their health is so poor, and they don't know. One form of treatment is a bit harsh on the body. Other treatment is not harsh on the body, but takes long to recover. So of course, then, of course, here Dharmarakshita a little bit critical. Of course, we try to seek any conventional method for help, but what he's saying is, if you really have received sacred teaching, you should accept the karma. On top of the medication, you should just let the suffering of the illness or whatever, let the understanding of Dharma empower you to not having to be so anxiety-ridden. Oh, will I get well? Oh, when I will get well? Oh, should I do this? Or shouldn't I do this? It doesn't even give a good stretch of the treatment for a go, There's always anxiety and fear and insecurity, and as if you can really prevent any certain things from happening. You can't outsmart with karma. Karma isn't outsmartable. Some of them you have to just tolerate it with teachings and then understand. So when we are very impatient and seeking immediate outcome, I shouldn't do this. When one starting to do this, one doubting this is God. Then one can't make up one's mind. One is then consulting all kinds of people. They say they are medium. They don't even know how many customers they'll get for the afternoon. They try to tell other people's society. So So divination and shamanism, of course, has a role for those people who don't have any spirituality, but those who have refuge in the Triple Gem to seek such guidance is probably contradicting themselves. That's why he says, dance and trample on the head of this ego, this betrayer, this the false conception, strike at this very heart of the ego, the butcher, the enemy. Forsaking the path of self-discipline, of liberation. So this is talking about the pratimoksha. I hold on to paternal home, casting happiness into the river. So this is talking about giving up the self-discipline of a pratimoksha and then try to go back to the home, to homelessness. Traditionally, people who have become monastics are those who have truly renounced the home, samsaric home, material home, and then gone to the homelessness. So it's referring to that. But a lot of the cultures, those young boys who are becoming ordained, they have nothing to renounce. They hardly survive. So they're actually becoming monks so that they can survive better. So that doesn't quite apply here. But in the author's case, it might be true. He's saying, though one has taken the discipline of a pratimoksha, but yet I'm trying to gain a paternal home. One's supposed to have gone from home to homelessness, live under a tree, but one is actually building homes, more solid homes that actually is like a castle. So therefore, the very happiness that comes from simplicity, renunciation, not hoarding, not possessing, one is letting those happiness drown into the river. So meaning that happiness from simplicity, homelessness. I don't know how happy homelessness is, but say if you're totally happy with the homelessness, that's very happy. You shouldn't drown the happiness of homelessness by possessing a home. In Australia, they go dream home. Nobody's dreaming to give up homes. So it's very hard practice. So casting happiness of the simplicity and homelessness into the river. So in those, Indian is you wouldn't believe how ascetic the Indians are. They're really talking what they write, Even today, not Buddhists, but the Indians are practicing this kind of homelessness, without thinking even they are Buddhist. They practice the tapasya. Tapasya means some kind of asceticism. Tapasya means hardship, penance on themselves. The more penance you accept, the more happiness there is. The more enjoyment you seek, the more suffering it will bring. So that's what they're referring to, the happiness drowning the happiness into the river. I run after misery. Yeah, so, those things I want are actually the very thing that cause ceaseless misery. But homelessness and simplicity and contentment has more lasting happiness. That only the more you're contented you are, less misery it will give. Instead of doing that, the self-discipline practice, self-discipline of they call contentment, simplicity, lack of desire, not missing people and their companions, not missing certain enjoyment and worldly activities and recreational activities, but simply contented to at solitude and meditation and simplicity. That would be what they call self-discipline of liberation. And one whose aims and objectives are completely opposite to that, but try to build a material or home and then only to perpetuate more suffering there is. If this is happening, obviously we want the the wisdom-eyed deity like Yamantaka to come out and seize and arrest and strike at the heart of this butcher, the enemy, the ego that is very hard to recognize. Referring to the the motivation of a practitioner in solitude. If his practice may be by maybe number, maybe duration, maybe the length of time is fasting, but yet he's expecting what kind of gains and worldly gains and status he will have, and if he's seeking that, then that definitely is spiritual materialism. And same goes with any kind of self-discipline. If one's self-discipline has not served the purpose, but one has used the self-discipline to gain one's material comfort, then indeed one has to renounce the real lasting happiness, and one is running after the very vicious cycle of misery. So this kind of a self-injunction is what they call monologuing. Practitioners themselves meditating in this great space in the mind, then they're having these kind of very good conversations that you actually are heeding to the teachings, and the teaching is pointing us to have this kind of monologue. And sometimes being in solitude, being free from associating with others, allows this kind of good conversations to yield clarification in one's mind. And hence, one is more contented with what one doesn't have, but rather than wanting this and that, and then discontented ever since, you know. So this is exactly what it's talking about, casting away the very happiness in the river, is that one who doesn't have this kind of good conversations just kind of outwardly look like you are in meditation, you are in retreat, but deep down you are not. And so, but if you may be still in the worldly kind of activities, doing outwardly worldly activities, but deep down you're having these kind of conversations, of course, you have got the ego, apprehended. Forsaking the gateway to liberation, I wander into wilderness. Though possessing a precious human rebirth, I seek hell realms. So this is talking about intention of a practitioner who wish to gain nirvana by forsaking the gateway to liberation. Instead of seeking to gain nirvana, one is giving up seeking liberation, but one is wandering hither and thither as various places that we go to will bring us more satisfaction. And so in the wandering, in the time that one spends in the wandering, in the wilderness means everywhere. He never contented and settled in one place of meditation, but one is constantly restlessly wandering hither and thither, not knowing how precious human rebirth is, how easily it will be lost, how fragile human life is, how precious though might be, it may easily come to an abrupt end. And then when one can't find the real lasting benefit, then I become upset and annoyed and frustrated very quickly, which means I seek the hell realm. Means I seek the hell realm means personally become really frustrated and angry and upset and negative and critical. Then they actually are seeking the hell realm. They are not really. So they're exactly opposite. Instead of finding the gateway to liberation, one is actually finding the gateway to the exact hell realms. So one who is therefore not putting very hard yardstick to practice to extract the essence of precious human rebirth, but wasting away the time in wandering hither and thither may be doing the very disservice, not only in future as hell realms, but even in this life, one is frustrated, angry, negative, and very, very unsettled. So therefore, he says, dance and trample on this head of this betrayer, false conception, mortally strike at the heart of this butcher, the enemy, the ego. Leaving aside the Dharma practice, I pursue profit through business. So this is talking about mundane, profit-making mentality, whose mind is losing the sight of how to practice Dharma, but primarily pursuing how to make material gain and benefit. So this is probably talking about our own livelihood, because so the real practice Dharma is abandoned, forgotten, maybe taken up for a little while and then it's no longer happening. The main effort goes to seek material advantage from the activities, however outwardly may look Dharma, leaving Dharma class behind. I loiter through downtown city. So meaning instead of studying in the class or meditating or debating or discussing or listening or thinking, one is actually finding bored by these, and one therefore loiter through some other places that is more interesting, that one can go to entice the senses, and therefore seeking those immediate pleasures of the senses without actually looking to being very attentive to seek the Dharma practice. So Dharma practice itself is abandoned, and one is abandoned and ignored and totally lost interest, and then one has developed the interest in other activities. If that's happening, of course, this is the very ego who is seeking temporal comfort and pleasures and entertainment and enjoyment. So this is the demon. This is the demon. Not only this life, this has been the demon in the past and so on. This is the very thing that has betrayed us, misled us so many times in the past, and it's yet again, even after discovering Dharma, it has the gut to abandon it, ignore it, and place less priority over it, or even doubt about its usefulness, and then one unhesitatingly engage into things and activities that totally undermines one's knowledge, one's disciplines, one's practice, one's commitment, one's knowledge, and one's helpfulness to others are all forgotten. So please, Manjushri or Yamantaka, with your wisdom and knowledge, as you have no reason to be angry at any of these, dancing in a graceful manner and trample on the head of this betrayer, because this ego is very difficult for my limited mind, the deluded mind, to recognize that it is doing this. That I'm yet again misguided by this. And so please help me to recognize this very butcher. Butcher means someone who killed me, harmed me. And the reason we found ourselves in the Dharma was this harmed us many times before. We previously thought it was other people, and the Dharma says, no, it's your own ego, your own karma, your own affliction. We recognize now this is the same butcher, same enemy, same ego that we previously thought we were introduced to, apprehended, but yet we are still completely beaten by these, and we are falling prey to these. Could you please assist me? So he's being a bit of a nuisance to Yamantaka in relation to oneself not ignoring one's precious human rebirth and ignoring practice Dharma. Forsaking one's own livelihood, I rob others' income, ignoring my own inherited wealth, I use others' possessions. So this is talking about one may have some particular livelihood, but whatever that it is, mundane or otherwise, whatever livelihood one is, one instead of relying on the sweat and tear of one's own hard work, one actually try to benefit from other people's sort of hard-earning money, ignoring my inherited wealth, meaning even though what we already have, and we're not really using much of them. Ignoring meaning we're neither using this for ourselves, nor sharing with others, nor even appreciating we have been given that much. And we don't even know we have been given that much. We have been handed down that much. Ignoring these are inherited, yet one has no hesitation to use them. So there actually is other people's possessions that I'm actually using, be that house, be that clothing, be that food, everything you use. People are not going easy in things. They're very greedy, and they try to get more benefit. If they have already one thing, they still want to get another benefit on top of that, as if. So they have no hesitation. So this kind of is livelihood is indeed wrong livelihood. So he's talking about how to be as a practitioner. Particularly as a Dharmarakshita himself, as a monk, he says that even though I have myself given up the homelessness, yet everything I get is from others, and spiritual wealth included is all come from the previous generation and generation before and so on, and yet one has a sense that these are mine. So this kind of ownership, that things are mine, is quite ungrateful, really. Everything that we are and we have came from others. So therefore we shouldn't think it's mine. But yet I'm doing this all the time. Please help me to arrest this betrayer, this misconception of myself, and strike at this butcher, the enemy, the ego. So then he laments, alas, though my endurance for meditation is weak. This is talking about the limited endurance one has effort in meditation. I covet clairvoyance, meaning we wish to have some certain spiritual abilities, whether there's a clairvoyance or clairaudience or reading the mind of the others or seeing remembering past or future lives or whatever mundane clairvoyance they call mundane. These are kind of a contaminated clairvoyance. One actually wishes to have certain spiritual abilities. Ability to die in a particular way, as if we can prove that I'm a great practitioner type of thing. So if the meditation is hopeless, he says weak. He says if my meditation is weak, its chances of having clairvoyance and dying in style would be very great, not so great. So, though I have barely started on the path, needlessly I have legs of a sprinter. So, talking about that you wanted to reach great speed of different stages of realization. So, one actually wished to say, I'm still stuck there, so impatient, I'm still like that, I'm still doing Undro. I did this last year. This kind of thing. But practitioners who have heard these teachings, of course, will not feel complacent with what one has done, but we recognize that our meditation is very weak. So we are nowhere near expecting great supernatural powers or clairvoyance at all. And so just always think oneself as a big beginner. This is Zen mind, beginner's mind, they call it. So that's why I barely started on the path because I'm just a beginner. I think it's very safe. Very safe. Dance and trample on this ego who thinks it's not a beginner, he thinks it's intermediate when he's a total beginner. Dance on the head of these mediocre when he thinks he's actually excellent. Dance on the head of this person who thinks excellent but actually not nearly there, not even near perfect. So this is why the teaching makes most people who are good practitioners very, very humble. They say, I know nothing, I have a lot of mistakes. It's probably true too. Because more practitioner you are, the more you detect your faults. And you're not really totally proud of it, but you at least now more engage in apprehending your own fault than pointing others, which is quite a safe thing to do. A lot of people are always engaged in pointing the finger at out there, you know. This is so if we as a beginner, we're still just beginning to notice how deluded we are. We thought we realized that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but still we realize, oh, I couldn't believe how deluded I am, how lazy I am, how undisciplined I am, how uncontented I am, how frustrated I am, how impatient I am. When one is, then of course one will not expect to run as a sprinter. One is just crawling, crawling, and a few minutes you crawl up, few minutes you slide back. And you're like, you're there? Yes, I'm still there. So it's actually humble. Humility is a good sign of practitioner, I think. Humility is a good sign of one whose head has been danced upon by Yamantaka a few times. Ask Yamantaka, hit harder, please. Hit harder on my head. Hit harder. When someone gives helpful advice, this could be critical. It could be quite critical. I view them as hostile foe. Yes, actually very helpful advice. But they say, "Who the hell are you telling me?" Thinking that he's very aggressive, or he's very, very impatient, or very picky, or very sort of nitpicking, or like that. Usually it's our loved ones, parents, friends, teachers, someone who loves you, who cares for us. They're the one. The others wouldn't care less. Let us rot in our own little closet. They wouldn't care. But only those who really care for us, helpful advice. They may not be saying, I'm going to help you, so listen to my advice. They may come a little bit impatiently, but actually these are they say people those who care for you do not speak sweet praises to you. In Tibetan, the one who cares for you speaks not pleasantly to you. So they will speak a bit harsh, but actually it's really they are actually giving the very advice that we need to hear. They are looking from their own point of view, just concerned for your well-being. If we have this attitude when someone gives a kind of criticism or advice or they care for you, because they care for you, they say this. If they don't care for you, they just leave it. It's none of my business, they call it. It doesn't concern me, they call it. So someone has the liberty to open their mouth because they care for us, hoping that this may give us change our direction, that we seem to be relatively lost. And if they're giving us that, it's helpful advice. But yet, we don't see them helpful. We don't see them they're concerned about my well-being. You don't see them as a constructive criticism. We see them as a destructive, hostile, aggressive kind of nitpicking. I view them as hostile foe. But when we are practitioners, it's not like that. When we are really in a good space, when somebody says this, we say thank you. When someone fools me with treachery, I repay the heartless one with kindness. So this is exactly opposite. Those people who actually misleading me, who's talking some flattery language, and actually they are there to fool us. We fall under under their spell. Then we think we are helped by them. Actually, as a result of their influence, we have been completely fooled. So we do not know who's helpful and who's really kind. So the one who's giving helpful advice, we think is hostile. One who's actually trying to fool us, we think they are friending me. They're protecting me from dangers. Oh, you're coming to help me. But actually, by siding them, you have actually done exactly opposite. So that is when ego is not aware of how big a spell the ego grasping itself is. The one who is not affected by this, instead of viewing the helpful advice, we see helpful advice as a hostile. We see them as they have taken liberty to come out of their comfort zone and come out to tell me this. It's just like saying someone beeping you from behind, telling your engine, your petrol tank, the lid has come off. They're just blowing the trumpet, and we think they're making they're doing it so to alert you that your petrol tank is loose. And sometimes we think, all of a sudden we realize they're doing it for our safety. Then we will stop, isn't it? Otherwise we think, who the hell are they? What did I do wrong to them? Often our loved ones do these things, but we don't realize that, and we then treat them with contempt. And we then resent them for the way they said, what they said, and then instead of seeing what they're really pointing to us, we misperceive that. But those who are try to actually fool us, try to guide us in a really dangerous path, we think they're helping me. Then they become very, 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 very friendly. Then they really have good ideas together. All of a sudden, they have all harmed mutually to each other. So when the ego get driven by such a negative influence, we don't see the negative as negative. When someone gives us helpful advice, we don't see the helpful as helpful. Why? Because of the ego. So therefore, help me, O Yamantaka, to alert me, to recognize this very ego grasping strike at this enemy. When someone treats me as their family, treats me as their family, T is missing there. Treats me as their family, I reveal their secret to their enemies. This is exactly like betraying. Someone really trusts us, they really treat us very good, and then we tell their secret to their enemies, to harm them, to undermine them. When someone befriends me, I betray their trust with no pangs of conscience. So this is talking about how untrustworthy, how unreliable, how betrayal we ourselves are in relation to other people, almost creating schism and scornfully creating schism and division by friends against friends and so on. So this kind of a lack of conscience is no other than the circulation of the ego. Please help me to recognize this and restrain me. Restrain me from revealing secret to the enemies. So why would I do that if I'm really a friend to somebody? I should tell them how to mind themselves better rather than informing their enemies, so that they can harm more on top of their own wrongdoings. So only enmity, people who have a certain vindictiveness and a vendetta will to do these things. So that very much shows how easily this ego grasping circulates without being apprehended. Therefore he calls upon the deity Yamantaka to help oneself to apprehend this. My ill temper is strong, my paranoia more cause than everyone's. So this is Dharmarakshita is recognizing. Now this meditator is often now able to apprehend the inner enemies. My ill temper is strong. One sees it's my ill temper. We think that other provocation is too bad. We think if they didn't do this, I have perfect temper. He says my ill temper is too strong. I wouldn't tolerate anything. That's the problem. That's what it is. My paranoia is more coarse than anyone else's. So now this is amazing recognition. This is kind of LangrI, self-recognition. We are recognizing our own faults. That's what meditators do when they're watching the breath or when they're counting the mantra. They're just a reference. They're only a reference, So then you recognize, as you start to gather time in meditation, then you start to recognize how ill-tempered we are, how short-tempered, how easily paranoid and upset and frustrated we are. But we used to think it's them, they're causing, they're doing, that instigated us. We have this kind of a feeling. Hard to make friends. I only provoke others' negativities. So now here Dharmarakshita is really, he's not being negative to himself. He's being very positive. He's recognizing this his own share of faults. This is not being negative to oneself. This is being very positive. Acknowledging one's own, own up your own mistakes. This is really, I'm short-tempered. I'm more paranoid than you are, but yet I think you are the cause of my paranoia. I'm the one who really is difficult to make friends. Even I make friends, I lose them quickly. Even though they're relatively good, I provoke their negativities, and I think it's their negativities that is actually harming me. Yet I don't realize what I do the triggering. I did, So it's very, very predisposed to the role that we play. But most people aren't able to recognize on their own role they play. They think he did this to me. He's so angry, they say. He's so impatient. But the only impatient person says the other person is so impatient. A patient person wouldn't even voice that. Because to voicing that someone is impatient is obviously impatient. So my temper is strong, My ill temper is strong, If you cannot get upset or get agitated quickly, either you're faking that you're so patient, or you're just or you just become unconscious, But being patient is very, very conscious practice. Patience is a very conscious practice. It's choosing the benefit of being patient rather than seeing the benefit of short temper and saying it's the other is the cause of my short temper. I only provoke others' negativities, he says. See, I'm the one who provoke negativity. Where do I think he's so negative? Why is he saying the way he's speaking to you? Did I trigger him? Did I provoke him? Probably I did. But if you didn't provoke it, then why are you worried about how he's speaking? See, exactly. It's obvious that we did the provoking unconsciously. If we didn't do anything, then we will be more focused. What can we do to him? We wouldn't be so short-tempered. So exactly what Shantideva writes in the chapter on patience, here Dharmarakshita is saying that my temper is so strongly short-tempered. He recognized that. He doesn't see someone who throws rock at him or whatever. He's not saying. He says, my short temper. My temper is so short, and my paranoia about what other people do is much more than what we think is he's paranoid about you. One is more recognizing. One is more owning up one's own short temper, one's own paranoia, and one's own difficulty to get on with other people. We think the other person is difficult to get on. We don't realize how difficult we are to get on from the other people's shoes, So one who recognizes that, then if you are really easy to get on with yourself, get on with yourself first. Go in the retreat and see how you can get on with yourself. Then you have no one to provoke you, no one to complain it. No one will open the door. No one will turn on the music. no one will deliver the milk. Whatever, just let be yourself. Then you see who can provoke you. And one meditator who went in the secret places, so his main problem was that the only mouse in the room. Then his problem was the mouse. So because if there's no mouse, maybe we'll quarrel with the walls. And the branches, and the trees, and the wind, and the storm, and the weather. Oh, terrible weather. It's miserable weather. People say it's miserable weather. Then when you have no animate beings near you to blame too, you see, when you're starting to fight with walls, that shows how paranoid we are. So this yogi practitioner is very observant. They really now they can start to see their own karma and afflictions and their temper and their paranoia and they're hard to get on with themselves. It's like that. It's whichever way you lie down is not comfortable. When you lie on the left is complaining the right one. Yes, you should sleep on your side. Then you sleep on your right side. Like that. Almost fighting hands with hands, Have to be perfectly paranoid. You can hit your own hand with your own hand because you have no one else to blame to. A lot of people like that. A few loners are like that. They're talking to us. Oh, don't do this. Oh, yes. They still see things that are not there. Amazing. So here we're talking about when someone asks for favors, if someone asks for us to help something, I ignore him, yet covertly cause him harm. When people need help, we don't want it. Otherwise, when we wanted to harm them, we do it with great enthusiasm, with great secrecy, great scheming and plan. When someone respects, I do not concur, but seek dispute from afar. So it's talking about how difficult the ego is to get on. When someone respects, we become suspicious. When somebody doesn't respect, we are very angry they don't. So if they keep a distance from us, we think they're ignoring us. When they come near to us, we think, what do you want from me? So childish sentient beings are very difficult to please somewhere else it says. But once you go away from the so-called childish being, you recognize and discover the inner childish one. So then you have a real conversation. Then you have really someone to talk to. I crave high status and hate low. This is talking about status. I want recognition, I want compliment, I want praise, I want feedback, and so on. Feedback. Gosh, the word says it all, isn't it? Feed the ego back. Filled as ego is hungry for praise. Feedback, I crave for high status and hate low. It means if people criticize them and they rate us low, we just hate it. But for the practitioner, it should be good. If somebody rates you low, it's good. Then because you can't rate yourself very low, you're so biased. So regard holy beings as enemies, and all of a sudden one become paranoid about all the divine and wisdom beings and so on. Because of strong desire, I'm eager to pursue the young. So this is talking about how mundane all of a sudden you want high, you want status, you want youthfulness, and you have some kind of some kind of contempt with the holy beings or spiritual persons, this means that one's ego is definitely rebelling. Rebelling. The true practitioners seek lowest of the lowest positions. They say the ranks of the street dogs. True practitioners seek ranks of the street dog. Of course, that doesn't mean that the dogs are lower, but society treats that way. Society treats that way. So if one who is not regarded anyone, who doesn't even deserve a seat, who doesn't have a seat allocation, it's really interesting. Sometimes when you go somewhere, there's no seat for you. You all of a sudden, oh gosh. all of a sudden, your name is not on the seat. Gosh, you haven't even got a seat for you. Maybe that's what we need, So then we go somewhere very important, and all of a sudden there's no seat. You got to go away, sit on the back row behind the chairs. Yeah, very dangerous culture. Some cultures are very seat conscious, seat and position conscious. Yes. Yeah. I think sometimes modern and Western world is a little bit liberated from that point of view, because seating isn't so much the way you sit. In a circle is good, like United Nations is very good. A circle is good. Anyway, whoever thinks that you have more status or say than others, of course, if we're craving that, we need Yamantaka. Come quickly. Here is the demon here. Could you please help me? I can't. He's so strong. I can't arrest him. And strike at them. Because of fickleness, I reject my past friendships. Yes, it's talking about our fickleness and our ungratefulness towards others. Whatever partings and changings things happen, we treat them with contempt. We treat them as they are not good enough to become our friend anymore. We speak not kindly about them. We reject them and their deeds or their opinions. That is because of our own fickleness, our own ungratefulness, our own ungenerousness, that we treat our past friendship with contempt and resentment. Infatuated with novelty, I speak animated to everyone. So, talking about how unfriendly we are, how resentful we are towards past, yet in this present moment, infatuated by novelty, we speak as if we are very, very sincere to their well-being, not realizing how soon we will treat them also with contempt as the norm applies. So he says that if you notice, we will all notice, don't we? We have past friends, even relatives, even blood relatives, towards whom we just don't want anything to do with it. We think it's them. We don't realize our own fickleness, our own sort of lack of faith, that we don't want to save our friendship. We wanted to see that our parting from the friendship is to do with them. We don't realize our own fickleness, our own mistakes, our own incooperativeness made the friendship to transpire not entirely of their doing. But yet, lots of people, they think that the reason we parted or we no longer have friendship is all to do with them. That attitude is, of course, need Yamantaka to help us to arrest, because usually we wouldn't recognize this. And also our friends will tell you, yeah, how did he dare treat you like that? I'm glad you're here. People think that they're helping us from such things. They have no idea how our ego was and still is. And so here, Dharmarakshita is really speaking, and it's so relevant to everyone, Only many passage of many years after people say, it's all my fault. Sometimes people say, it's all my fault. It's due to my selfishness. But then they're angry at them just as much. So that isn't the case. That isn't recommended at all here. That it was partly due to the parting of friendship or meetings is inevitable. To think it's entirely them and treat them with contempt is really unfair to them as well as to oneself. This is self-butchering. This is not only butchering them, but this is also butchering oneself. So that's why he says, please go and trample this butcher that I haven't recognized this. This is the friend who they help us so many years or whatever. Yet I have nothing to do with them. I need the help of Yamantaka to arrest them, to trample on the head of this very enemy, this very butcher, this very enemy that I hardly have recognized and apprehended like this. Lacking clairvoyance, I tell lies and deprecation. So this talking about, of course, spiritual lies, spiritual lies, saying I can see the past, or I can remember past lives, or I know where you're going to go in the future. Sort of people say, my instincts tell you, or something like that. People think they don't know what they're eating will make them sick, But yet they can tell somebody else's instinct can tell where the person is doing, So he says, lacking any of such awareness, let alone clairvoyance, yet I tell as if I know. In Buddhism and some culture, Buddhist beliefs of dangers, people think you know. And they actually consult you as you know the things, as you are soothsayer or so clairvoyant, or you got some supernatural spiritual powers, Please, could you check that in your dream? It's really ridiculous. There are some people who do that, maybe they have some talent. We are not saying they don't, Not all egos are bad. Some egos are relatively washed, and they can see this. So because Dharmarakshita is very, very critical of this spiritual materialism, He's very critical of spiritual materialism, Lacking compassion, I betray others' trust and make them hurt. So it's talking about as if what we're doing to each other is good, but it's weird. What we're doing to each other is very uncompassionate. We have no idea how quickly vulnerable and offendable, easily hurt and very fragile sentient beings are. Yet we didn't have any sensitivity to see this is going to be future suffering and cause of future suffering. So instead of that, one actually do as if it's just perfectly fine, but one doesn't realize how offendable, how fragile, and how vulnerable deluded sentient beings are. So he's talking about lacking compassion. We think they are not compassionate to us, but if we have compassion, then of course we will not say things. We will not do particular ways. We will not think the way we think about them. So, because what hurts them is what we think of them, with ill will or judgment or blaming or naming or anger. We don't realize that will hurt them. If they knew what we were thinking about them, they will be more hurt than what we physically did or verbally said. These days, of course, it shows very clearly. Some hurt are pardonable if it's not intended, even the physical injuries. So they are questioning whether there was intention to hurt, intention to kill, intention to murder. Even the person was killed by the very person, cold-bloodedly. But yet they want to check whether there was intention to kill. So it's talking about whether there's intention on top of the actual physical harm or injury or stabbing or hitting were there or not. So this is talking about degree of concern, whether we lack the concern and compassion or whether we had the concern and compassion. So often we can't recognize this. We are so misgiving and very unperceptive. Therefore, ho Yamantaka, because Yamantaka is a seer. Seer with fierce eyes of compassion, he will alert you and recognize these false inner butcher, the enemy, the ego, has to recognize. We think we're doing them a benefit. We think we are saying this to help them, but we didn't realize what we were saying or doing and thinking will actually hurt them. So not this proliferation of this non-recognizer of the problem and the intention is what we need the help of the deity, because the deity will alert you, deity will inform you, give you a wisdom eye that we don't have usually. If you have a deity, it will it will warn you, it will signal you, it will help you. So when you have this kind of a deity, isn't the deity outside here. Deity means some kind of a sixth sense awareness that restrains you from reacting by any of the five senses, let alone collectively. That is probably the deified notion of the subtle awareness that can hasten us, that can pause us, and then make us hesitate from saying or forming an opinion. That is Yamantaka, because this Yamantaka kills the betrayer that usually doesn't heed to Yamantaka. So who's Yamantaka? Yamantaka is this sixth sense awareness. They call it the deity as a devotee, some as a deity as external God to help us, others as a friend, others as your own, some practitioners see that as a master out there, as a deity. Others see as a friend out there. You call them, they come to you. The others is when you are with yourself, you will come to your senses. That's the deity, or really Yoga Tantra level of deity is that your own awareness, not a kind of multi-handed or deity comes from southwest China or the land of the Swat Valley. It's pretty far, from Afghanistan all the way to Australia. It takes a while, So it's not like that kind of deity he's referring to. So some people are like that, they think the deity is out there, or as a master you call them, or a friend you call them. The more sadhana practitioner will see them as soon as you recite the mantra. So when he says, oh, Yamantaka, it doesn't really mean you call him Yamantaka. You just use the mantra to, they say mantra that surpasses all other mantras. There's no real thing that you see as truly existent, let alone to harm to or fight against. You see the emptiness. That's really the deity of emptiness, is the highest deity. But of course, here, Dharmarakshita and others just implies, this teaching of emptiness is implied, I think we can talk about that because we quite a lot of time talk emptiness as really the deity. Even the deity is so that we don't forget the emptiness and not treat the emptiness as nihilistically. But we see the awareness, the recognition. That this recognition is that arrests the butcher, this ego that is not really usually perceived and apprehended as the perpetrator, really perpetrator. So here, the deity we're invoking is not an external god, external king, or even a friend. It's your own senses, your own six senses. If you have time to consult that, the time it takes to consult the sixth sense is the time we have to be willing to be patient with. That is really the Yamantaka he's talking about. Of course, as soon as you see that deity, of course, there's nothing to kill. Then, of course, ego itself is apprehended. This seeing the seer, they call seeing the seer. What is the seen? It's an emptiness. Yeah. The false ego. Yeah, false ego is a misconception. Yeah. Let alone the external one. There's not even an internal ego, ultimately speaking. So of course, when we read the Heart Sutra, this is why the Heart Sutra is always read in Buddhist teachings. So that ultimately we should aim to have glimpses of this form is emptiness, Form is emptiness, Form is not lacking of form. Form is empty of inherent, independently, truly, unitarily existing thing. That means form is emptiness. It doesn't mean form doesn't exist. Form exists as it is imputed, but form doesn't exist from its own side. And hence, even recognition of the demon, ego, if there is no form, but form that is emptiness, then of course, if there's ego, it has to be empty ego. You see? So apprehension of the ego is seeing the form that is empty. That's here. That's the one who sees that is the deity, is the awareness. Is the awareness with which we can recognize. With feeble learning, all subjects I make wild guesses. As my spiritual transformation is scant, I develop wrong view about everything. So this is talking about all the guessings we do, all the assumptions. Most of the misunderstanding between people are all assumptions. They never checked what one thought was the fact or fiction. If one checked with the other, it will be allayed. It was not the case. So most of the time we're just guessing. With feeble learning, meaning if you have strong learning, you will see what you see is just what is not what you see. It is empty of what you see. They say there's no form, no smell, no sound, no smell, no touch. What does it mean that why we listen? There's no this, no that. One who has adequate learning said there is no form that you have to guess. Even the guessing itself is form. Even the guessing itself is emptiness, let alone the guessed. But when our learning is feeble, we think that what we see is exactly what it is. We don't even think it's our guessing, our just assumption. It's like seeing snake in the striped rope. If one checked carefully with the torch and so on, with finding out what that, then one will have strong knowledge. Not only the shape looks like snake, but color looks like snake, but actually, is it really a living snake or a dead snake or a rope? If you see a snake, it might even be dead. No, one which is venomous and going about to latch at you. You see that? So it's like where your mother speaks to you, or where your father speaks to you, or where the ex speaks to you, or where your daughter speaks to you. We're guessing that she's really violent or aggressive or doesn't love you. We're just guessing, We didn't realize they actually care for you very much. They actually love you very much. They actually wanted to say they love you, but you didn't allow them to say even that. You just quickly jumped into conclusion. Often we're so impatient. We were talking before. We're so short-tempered, paranoid. Exactly, yeah. If we have sufficient learning, unlike feeble learning, we'll say, why is she speaking like that? Not to get at me. straight away you show concern about them, and then we don't make these wild guesses. Then we will subdue our guesses. We'll moderate our perceptions and our approach and methods and remedy, or how we apply even the remedy. The remedy itself is not a fix. It's how we apply the remedy. You might have the correct screwdriver, but if you do very forcefully, it might break the screwdriver itself. Yeah, that's right. So you need a little bit of gentleness, a little bit of patience. You need to know whether you're putting it correctly or not. Yeah. So it's a very important, amazing how if we have this kind of sufficient knowledge, sufficient learning, we will not make wild guesses and assumptions. As my spiritual transmission is scant, so he's lamenting on the feebleness of his spiritual teachings, transmission, knowledge, and sitting at the feet of the teacher and teachers and so on. I developed wrong view about everything. So I, meaning that this their fault, it's my fault, I shouldn't have done this, or they shouldn't have said this to me, and if they didn't do this, I wouldn't have done this is how I got caught, or something. We develop all the reasons become wrong views, all the reasons becomes just completely mutually harmful wrong view about everything, basically. Hardly anything we have right views. Please, Yamantaka, it says, rise up and tremble and recognize, strike at this enemy and help it to be apprehended. Addicted to attachment and aversion, I insult others who hold opposite views. So meaning if we can't tolerate the views that we don't share with others, or others who don't honor or respect or our views, we feel very, very, very much insulted. We think they got some vendetta against us. We don't realize our own views are very, very slanted. Our own views are very perverted by the self-grasping, my view. That our view is only relative, but we think our view is ultimate. Addicted to jealousy, I slander and denigrate others. So if we are slandering others, we are denigrating others because we're not approving of their success or their intelligence or their diligence or whatever. It's mainly to do with that, but yet we think it's not. We are very jealous to others. We can't rejoice other people's, and so this sign of attachment and aversion and jealousy are all proliferation of the demon of selfishness. Please help me to identify, recognize this. Failing to study, I'm an imposter. It's talking about inadequate study, reading, listening, contemplating, and therefore one makes them as one goes, One is actually making them up. I'm an imposter. Failing to have pure perception. All I speak are sacrilege. And then when we speak things, we speak with a great kind of disrespect and disregard and with no consideration, because oneself have no pure perception. One who has a pure perception speaks with great love and respect and kindness and compassion and honor and gentleness and carefulness. But one who lacks the pure perception is completely waxed. Their eyes are waxed by impure delusions, and therefore I speak with such a contemptuous language. So when we are speaking and thinking even without saying, if we are thinking with the sacrilege views and disrespectful and very doubtful and very contemptuous attitudes, he says these are mainly because we lack pure perception. So that's why we are seeing the things or thinking the things, because of our own failure to have pure perception or kind perception or respectful perception or grateful perception or careful perception, at least. If neither of these are present, of course, then everything we see, we think are wrong in the object and the perceived. We think it's the perceived that's the problem. We don't see the perceived is the opinion of the perceiver. We can't even distinguish that. We don't even have any sense of ownership of the perception, of the opinion of our own perception. Our own thoughts is coloring the perception of the perceived. Because we lack the good perception, so kind perception, tolerant perception, compassion and forgiving and kind perception, because we lack all of that, we probably is really, really aggressive, negative, critical. We can see their faults all over the place because they are mainly projection of one's own impure perception. And therefore, we have this competence to speak with such verbose and negative, critical, and ungenerous words. This definitely shows inadequacy of our knowledge and lack of pure perception. Instead of condemning the non-dharmic activities, talking to oneself, if one is engaging in certain activities that are non-dharmic, such as contrary to the Dharma activities, definitely nowhere near Dharma, but activities that are mundane, that are selfish, that are merely physical, that are mainly driven by five senses only, then definitely I make various refutation of the complete good sayings. So this is talking about instead of condemning one's own non-dharma activities, one is actually have the guts to stand up against some of the completely reliable, authentic teachings of the Buddha, teachings of the enlightened ones, saying there's no future rebirth or life after death or I haven't seen this before type of thing. Such kind of pretense thing. There's no future life because I haven't seen it type of thing. Of course, you can say that, but that's not a room for refutation. You can't refute the non-existence of it. It's only proof that you haven't seen it. If what we haven't seen is a proof of non-existence, this whole world doesn't exist except the little world of Canberra, or little world of the towns and places we have. So that's no proof that they're non-existence. So a lot of people are in the names of reasons or signs or something. Quite a lot of neo-Buddhist or half-Buddhist, even intellectually, they doubt some of the fundamental tenets of teachings, even though they may be very, very conversant in some of the tenets of Buddhist teachings, but some of the very fundamental things they try to refute, try to ask questions. Okay. Try to influence many others to hurt their feelings, those who believe. Could be probably more harm than benefit. They may sell a lot of books, yes. But there's a lot of authors, they sell a lot of books, but they cannot come out. There are authors who have to hide. Who sell their books, benefit from them, but they cannot come out because they hurt a lot of people's feelings. And in the name of art, you probably can do it. We're not saying artists can't do it. But if the very intent is to hurt the feelings of the people and prove that he is so smart that 1 billion people's beliefs and faiths will be upset if you wrote such a book that hurts the feelings of others, he or she may sell a lot of books, but all he's done is he has made everybody hurt. Then is that art? Is that knowledge? It seems ego to me. That's what Dharmarakshita is saying, I make various refutation of complete good sayings, that has helped lots of people. Lots of people draw comfort from Quran or Bible or whatever, Even though there are lots of things you disagree, but, you can keep to your bedroom or keep to your closet. But to air in everybody and publish in the Unwin and Goodwins or whatever those publishers are, They're up there. They're out there to make money from people's misery. That's for sure. So it's talking about, yes, those polemic writings in the name of authorship or scholarship. Of course, sometimes it's just art, Fiction may be okay. But is a fiction or actual? One has written that as in a fictitious writing, as a form of a play or something. It's quite a different matter. But actually, blatantly attacking some of the fundamental doctrines believed and honored, cherished by many, without having a healthy discussion is quite a different thing. Quite a healthy discussion is a good thing. But condemning them as they're wrong. And to do that has cost people's lives, And we know that. They may have been rich, but they can't go out. When they go, they have to wear a wig. Because they put their name is on the title of the books, and the books are selling because of the title and the author, not because maybe sometimes it's an interesting read, but to most people it's upsetting, They want to burn it in some places. Of course, some dictatorial people will burn even the good books. They don't allow any holy books. I'm told in like in North Korea or somewhere, they don't allow. You can come as a tourist, but you can't do any religious thing while you're on a tourist. Of course, we're talking about how one's ego, ego can drive one's certain skills as a writing and one's eloquency or orator, or speak against complete good sayings, well-loved and well-respected teachings, and hurting lots of people's feeling. If you did that, then obviously it's ego. It's ego-driven thing. There's no doubt of that. Failing to detect the signs of disgrace as a source of shame, perversely I hold signs of honor as a source of shame. So this is talking about the disgrace and shameful things that one does, one thinks, or one knows. Mortally strike at them. Instead of doing even one suitable task, I'm doing only that are improper deeds. So not even doing one thing, but only doing that are improper. So it's talking about disgraceful, shameful things, as well as doing improper things. Improper by the nature, improper by the land or conventions or norms of society or anything. If one does, one should recognize them as a cause of embarrassment, a shame to oneself, and please let asking for Yamantaka to help oneself to apprehend these without further delay. And therefore calling on the awareness of sixth sense consciousness to allow one to empower oneself to create a different outcome by this awareness of turning the wheel of sharp weapons to destroy the very facets of negative karmic habits under the cloud of ego that is often difficult to apprehend, recognize, and tame. So we'll conclude here. The dedication of merits. By the merit of this, may we attain the state of omniscience, defeat the evil enemies of defilements. May I liberate all sentient beings from the samsara oceans, the turbulent waves, birth, old age, sickness, and death. By listening to the excellent and precious Mahayana teachings, whatever boundless merit I have acquired, may all sentient beings become precious and stainless vessels to retain the excellent and precious Mahayana teachings. May the supreme and precious bodhicitta take birth, if we had not done so. Where it has been born, may it increase abundantly without degeneration.